The Zarkathi Royal Station hummed with tension. Hannah pressed her scaled forehead against the reinforced glass of the nursery, her golden eyes reflecting pure anguish. Inside, two small cubs, barely 3 weeks old, wailed with a desperation that tore through every heart on the station. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Trellick said softly, his mandibles clicking with distress. "The physicians have tried everything. We've brought in specialists from 4 systems." Hannah didn't turn from the window. Her cubs, Kira and Zahn, writhed in their temperature-controlled pods, tiny claws grasping at nothing. They had been crying for 16 hours straight. The king's death was unexpected, she whispered. They know. Somehow they know their father is gone. Across the station, in the maintenance sector, Evan dragged his mop across the gleaming floors of Corridor 7B. The human janitor had been working the 3rd shift for 8 months now, ever since the Galactic Union had opened employment opportunities to humans. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid better than anything Earthside, and the Zarkathi treated him with more respect than his old bosses ever had. His communicator buzzed. "Maintenance to Royal Wing, urgent." Evan frowned. The Royal Wing? He grabbed his equipment cart and headed toward the station's center, where he'd never been permitted before. When he arrived, a cluster of elegantly dressed aliens parted before him. Their expressions ranged from desperate to skeptical. A tall Zarkathi female, her scales shimmering with royal purple, stood before him. "You are the human?" Queen Hannah asked. "Evan, ma'am. I mean, Your Majesty." He straightened his worn jumpsuit self-consciously. "My cubs are dying," she said bluntly. "Not physically, perhaps. But they will not eat, will not sleep. Every being on this station has tried to comfort them. Nothing works," her voice cracked. "I read something once. About human caretakers. About their success with distressed young across multiple species." Evan's mind raced. "I'm just a janitor, ma'am. I don't know anything about—" "Please." The single word carried the weight of a mother's breaking heart. He found himself being led into the nursery. The crying hit him like a physical wave, not just sound, but emotion. Raw grief and fear poured from the 2 tiny creatures. They were beautiful, covered in soft, downy scales that would eventually harden into the armored plating of adult Zarkathi. The cubs were small enough to fit in his hands. Their eyes, too large for their faces, were squeezed shut as they cried. "May I?" Evan asked. Hannah nodded, unable to speak. Evan removed his work gloves and reached into the first pod. Baby Kira's body was warm, warmer than human babies. He lifted her gently, supporting her head the way his sister had taught him with her own kids. The cub's cries intensified for a moment, then faltered as unfamiliar arms cradled her. "Hey there, little one," Evan murmured. I know everything's scary right now." He sat down in the room's single chair and settled Kira against his chest. The cub's tiny claws pricked through his jumpsuit, seeking purchase. Evan began to hum, an old lullaby his grandmother had sung to him, something about stars and sailing ships. Kira's cries reduced to hiccuping whimpers. "The other one too," Hannah said urgently. "Please." Evan adjusted his hold, and Ambassador Trellick carefully placed Zahn against his other side. The second cub immediately burrowed against him, scales rasping against fabric. The room fell silent. Both cubs were breathing in shuddering gasps. Their crying finally stopped. Evan kept humming, his deep voice resonating through his chest where the babies rested. "What is that sound?" Hannah whispered. "Just a song my grandma taught me," Evan said softly. "Nothing special." "It's everything," she breathed. For the next 20 minutes, no one moved. Evan continued his quiet humming, occasionally switching to different melodies. The cubs' breathing gradually steadied. Their tiny bodies, taut with distress for so long, began to relax. Then Kira yawned, displaying rows of tiny, needle-sharp teeth. Her eyes, still wet with tears, drifted closed. Zahn followed moments later, a small chirping sound escaping his throat before he too surrendered to sleep. Evan looked up to find every alien in the room staring at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Hannah had tears streaming down her scaled face. "How?" she asked. "Every expert, every physician, I think," Evan said carefully. "They just needed to know someone was there, that they weren't alone." He glanced down at the sleeping cubs. "My nephew went through something similar when his dad was deployed. Sometimes kids just need to feel a heartbeat, you know? Something steady. Something that says, 'You're safe, I've got you.'" A heartbeat, Hannah repeated. Our physicians tried temperature regulation, pheromones, sonic frequencies. She laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. We never considered something so simple. Humans are social creatures, Ambassador Trellix observed. Their young require physical contact for healthy development. But we had no idea this instinct would translate across species barriers. Could you stay?
Hannah asked Evan. Just until they wake?
I cannot bear for them to cry like that again. Evan shifted carefully, settling in for a long wait. Yeah, Your Majesty. I can stay. He remained there for 6 hours. The cubs slept peacefully against his chest, occasionally stirring but settling immediately at the sound of his voice or the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. When they finally woke, they ate for the first time since their father's death, taking nourishment from feeding vessels held by their mother. The story spread through the station like wildfire. The human janitor who had calmed the inconsolable royal cubs. Within days, Evan found himself reassigned, officially titled Royal Comfort Specialist, though he insisted everyone just call him Evan. He spent his evenings in the nursery now, and the cubs thrived under his care. Hannah often joined him, and slowly they became friends. She told him about Zarkathi culture, about her late mate, about the weight of ruling during grief. He told her about Earth, about humanity's long struggle to reach the stars, about the grandmother who had taught him those simple songs. You know what's funny? Evan said one evening, both cubs snoring softly against him. Back on Earth, I was nobody, just another guy pushing a mop. But here I'm the guy who figured out that sometimes all anyone needs, human, alien, whatever, is just someone to hold them while they hurt. Hannah touched his shoulder gently, her claws careful against his skin. That, she said, is not nothing, Evan. That is perhaps the most important thing of all. Outside the nursery windows, the stars wheeled through their eternal dance. And in that small room on a station far from Earth, a human janitor proved that compassion needed no translation, only a willing heart and open arms.